This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus, and sometimes I write about the rest of the state. This episode is a continuation in my series about the Columbus Housing Authority, and this is about my pursuit for public information. Let me give you a little context about public accountability. In an era of increasing demand for governmental transparency, the pursuit of public information represents a really critical aspect of civic engagement. This narrative of this podcast explores the complex interactions between myself and the Columbus Housing Authority, revealing some systemic challenges in public information access there. What seemed like a straightforward request has now become a frustrating journey of bureaucratic obstacles and communication challenges. Let me explain. First, it began with a seemingly simple request for public information. However, the initial interaction at the Columbus Housing Authority exposed deep-seated institutional resistance from the very first person I contacted on the telephone. So the story begins with my attempt to obtain public information from the Columbus Housing Authority, also called CHA. And what seemed like a straightforward request has quickly become an interesting communication challenge, to say the least. So the first person I spoke with who answered the phone there was very defensive when I asked for how to request information from their organization. She wanted to know who I was, what my business was with asking, and she was very reluctant to answer even the simplest question and to share any information, especially when I asked if the website that I was on was the accurate website and if there was a more current website. She also was very suspicious of my motives. Now, I'm a private citizen as well as a podcast journalist, and so I'm entitled, just like you are, to ask an organization that takes our tax dollars how to do a public information request. Clearly, the first person who answered the phone was not keen to help me, although we'll go into it later. She did send me to someone eventually when I asked. She did give me her immediate supervisor after I pushed. So this interaction with this person highlighted several critical psychological barriers. First, they seem to have a very high fear of exposure, although exposure of what, I don't know. They're very protective of their organizational culture, and there was some ingrained bureaucratic defensiveness, clearly. The response of this person demonstrates very minimal transparency on this organization at an entry level. And it was interesting how she used basic obfuscation techniques, and she attempted to discourage me from further inquiry, which forced me to ask to speak to her supervisor. The turning point then came when that supervisor, the deputy director, entered the conversation. Unlike the first person I spoke to, this individual was far more transparent and cooperative. They candidly admitted to some organizational shortcomings, such as an outdated website and potentially incomplete contact information. This deputy director showed a more nuanced and professional approach to dealing with the public, while acknowledging their organization's limitations, and she did provide some partial insights into their internal challenges. Now, she did not know how their Freedom of Information Act policies worked, or if they even had any. So that led to her telling me that a man named Robert Graythree was the organization's current director, and that he also serves as the controller, which is an odd dual leadership role. And she did recognize and acknowledge that the website was a bit antiquated and in need of updates, and that board member and directorship information on the website was 2 years out of date. Now, here let's talk about some questions I have. If Graythree, and he is, Graythree is acting as the director of the organization for the last year and as the controller of the organization, meaning as the executive director, he's also acting as the financial operations manager. Let me explain why that's deeply concerning. First, a financial controller is a high-level manager who's responsible for overseeing a company's financial operations and ensuring that accurate financial reporting is done. They manage the accounting team or an outside accounting team. They advise executives on finance matters, and they ensure that the accounting of the operation functions and runs smoothly. They are supposed to be part of the checks and balances system that is the counterpart of the executive director. They are not supposed to be one and the same. The reason why is that the controller is responsible for financial reporting and compliance, and that they are compliant with relevant regulations. They have to deal with budgeting and forecasting and developing and managing the budgets and any future financial performance and reporting on budget variances. So they oversee the accounting, the payroll, the accounts payable, the accounts receivable. They are the accounting operations management team for an organization. They also manage the internal controls and the audit coordination. And they're the ones who are responsible for financial accuracy and coordinating with external auditors. They are supposed to identify and manage financial risks. They are supposed to regularly communicate financial information to the chief financial officer and to board members and other stakeholders, and they're supposed to provide financial analysis to support strategic decision making, and they're supposed to ensure compliance with tax laws and regulations. Essentially, the controller is a very crucial figure in any company, ensuring the financial integrity of the organization and providing financial insights for effective decision making. So it would seem that the executive director, also acting as controller, is quite probably a serious conflict of interest and leads to a possibility of, let's just say, the fox watching the hen house if the moral underpinnings of the executive director are not that strong. This is quite an alarming discovery, especially in light of the fact that he is not forthcoming in a simple request for the FOIA process in their organization. Now, this dual leadership is clearly a conflict of interest, and it leads me to question a whole bunch of other things. So there's some technological infrastructure weaknesses, like the outdated website, the incomplete digital presence, the limited online accessibility. The information management seems to be weak as well because the board member information is rather stale, especially with the 2-year-old contact records and the very ineffective communication of any protocols within the organization, much less any other transparency like budgets, money's coming in, money's going out. There's no transparency through their website. This is what I've done so far, just so that we are transparent. I sent a formal email yesterday asking for their process. Now, I'm going to read this to you. I'll read exactly what I sent them, the first email, and why we need to know this. First email I sent them is, I'm looking for information I thought might be on your website. However, I was informed your site is being revised. Do you have a specific form for public records requests? If so, can you point me in the right direction or email me a form? Or is a letter of request sufficient with specific types of documents listed requested? I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, and I put my name. Not heard back. The only thing I did hear back was from the attorney stating that Mr. Gray 3 would be the one who would answer, and if I have any issues, to reach back out to the attorney and he would happily advise. That was yesterday. I hadn't heard a peep from Mr. Gray 3. I haven't had a, hey, we're working on it, or we don't have that kind of a document, but let me get somebody to make one up. I'll get back to you on Monday. I haven't gotten anything. So, after 5 o'clock today, I waited until 6:30 tonight, and I wrote a follow-up email. Yesterday, I asked for information on processes for placing a request for public information from your organization. I'm most disappointed that the director has not bothered to respond, despite the board attorney stating that the director would be in touch. I'm expecting a response by Monday, April 28th by noon, that at least provides some direction on how to process my request. As a public government entity, public requests for information from government entities are governed by laws like the Freedom of Information Act at the federal level and state-specific public records laws. These laws generally provide citizens the right to access government records, subject to certain exemptions and limitations. Federal level FOIAs provide a right to access. The FOIA ensures the public can request and access records from federal agencies. Exemptions: certain types of records are exempt from disclosures, such as relating to national security, personal privacy, or ongoing law enforcement investigations. The right to process is enforceable in court. These laws are designed to promote transparency and accountability in government. I know that your organization will want to be compliant and transparent. I look forward to your immediate response. I sent that tonight. Despite expectations of a professional response, I've been met with silence so far, and that was why I sent the second email. No acknowledgement, no interim message, no communication whatsoever. What this tells us is we have some critical issues at Columbus Housing Authority that should be addressed. There's the bureaucratic opacity, there's the resistance to public scrutiny, the institutional communication failures, and the potential accountability gaps that are there. I've attempted to find contact information on the website, only to discover the site was under construction. That has transpired since yesterday evening, so I had to utilize the Wayback Machine to locate alternative contact emails and follow-up email addresses. We as citizens are empowered through our laws and the expectation of transparency. There are accountability mechanisms in place, but it requires democratic participation. You can do what I'm doing. And there is an institutional challenge process that we can use to try and get to the bottom of informational vacuums and to demand transparency and accountability. There are some organizational behaviors that are quite interesting that I am witnessing through this. The first one is this very defensive communication strategy that I encountered with the person who answers the phone, as well as the lack of communication back from the current executive director. There also seems to be a power dynamic in some of these public institutions in Columbus that is very interesting. They are very resistant to external scrutiny, and they have a lot of institutional inertia. Seems like Columbus Housing Authority is in the same boat as some other institutions in this town. What we need to do as citizens is to persistently seek information, to document our interactions through emails, and to challenge this institutional veil that they've put up to keep us from seeing what is going on behind the curtains in their organization, and to advocate for transparent governance. This particular difficulty that I'm running into right at the moment in trying to get just basic Freedom of Information Act forms, I'm not even asking for the content yet, I'm just asking for the forms and their process, is a really compelling example of the potential barriers that you too will face when seeking basic information for public institutions. And thus, this episode highlights the need for more open and responsive communication channels with public entities like the Columbus Housing Authority. This is open-ended. It is not done. It's going to take further investigation, and I'm going to keep digging, and if necessary, I'm going to propose potential systemic reforms in their public information accessibility. But in the meantime, I will keep digging and I will keep pushing for information. But if you have any information to share, any insights, etc., about the Columbus Housing Authority, please email me at tombigbytales, that's Tales as a story, .com. I look forward to hearing from you, and until next time, I'm Shannon Evans and the Tom Bigby Tales.